And you're good to go.
Great. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. And I would like to call the October 19th, 2022 North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council meeting to order. Welcome. As I mentioned, this is my first meeting as chair, so very pleased to be here, and thank you to community members and my fellow council members for your participation and engagement in this meeting and your dedication to this community. Before we get going, just a couple of opening remarks for anyone with us for the first time. The North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council serves the communities of Kenwood and Glen Ellen and Rancho Madrone, as well as the former Sonoma Developmental Center at Eldridge. As the local arm of county government, or the most local arm, we represent people who live and work outside of incorporated cities like Sonoma or Santa Rosa. Like other advisory councils in Sonoma County, we were established by the Board of Supervisors to act as a two-way communication channel. So the MAC served as our community voice at county government, as a means for us to learn about and access county resources, and as a place to identify challenges and opportunities and innovate solutions in partnership with our supervisor, Susan Gorin. Our bylaws limit us to issues concerning transportation, health, and human safety, community projects, and emergency preparedness. However, others can be added at the request of our supervisor. And of course, there are no limitations on subject matter during the public comment section at the beginning of the meeting, which we'll come to in just a few minutes. So with that, I have one more announcement to make. Council member Jed Cooper has recently sent notice to Council member Dawson and Hannah and I that he is going to be resigning from the MAC for not because he hasn't enjoyed his time there, but because he has other priorities, personal and family matters, and he as stepping down. So that will be an opening, and if anyone in the community is interested in applying for that position or a role on the MAC, please, I think the easiest way to do this is to email Hannah. Hannah's email is on the agenda. If you can't find it, let us know, and Hannah will direct you to where the application portal is on the website. And with that, Hannah, do you want to put the flag up and we'll do the pledge? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. And Arthur, I like your tradition of the land acknowledgement, so I'm going to ask that you please read the land acknowledgement. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kate. And then after that, I'll take roll. Does
Thank
that
you.
well?
Yes,
Okay.
great.
Yeah. So we would like to acknowledge that the citizens and communities served by the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council occupy the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok, who are closely related to neighboring indigenous peoples, the Pomo, the Wapo, and others. Asking forgiveness for past transgressions they and their ancestors experienced, we humbly invite them to join us in person or in spirit as we give gratitude for their ongoing stewardship of this place since time immemorial. Recognizing how much we benefit from their continuing presence as culture keepers and teachers, we commit ourselves to building positive and lasting relationships with our local indigenous community and to honor all the diverse peoples of our region. And now I'd like to take roll. Let's see. I have a number of names crossed off here. Let's see. Council member Handren, not here. Council member Newhouser, not here. Council member Nardo Morgan, she's here. Council member Oldroyd,
here. Sorry.
Council member Dickey.
Here.
Let's see, Vice Chair Dawson here, and Chair Eagles
Here.
And I think that's it. Yeah. All right, so we have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. Thank you, Arthur. So a couple of quick announcements, and then we'll get into the agenda a bit more. Q&A and chat are turned off for this meeting when public comment is opened. If you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand function on Zoom to be recognized and promoted to speak. You'll have 2 minutes. If at any time it appears our meeting has been hacked, we will immediately terminate the meeting and reschedule for a future date. So thank you. I think now, are there any, I'm going to ask the fellow council members if there are any amendments or corrections to the September 21st minutes. And if not, a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Looks like they're approved. Great, thank you. Thank you. Next, we're going to move to public comment. And this is public comment for items not appearing on the agenda only. We have received no written public comments on matters not appearing on the agenda. So I'll ask if anyone wants to speak on matters not on the agenda. Please raise your hand and Hannah will call on you in sequence for a 2-minute time. Yeah, Hannah, anything coming up on public comment?
And it looks like we have at least one hand raised, so I'll go ahead and share the timer. All right, and this is for Claudia. Claudia, you should be able to unmute.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Claudia Vecchio, and I am with Sonoma County Tourism, and I come here tonight as the president and CEO of Sonoma County Tourism, but I'm also coming from my home in Oakmont, so I'm kind of part of this group as well in some ways. The reason for the public comment tonight is that we, as Sonoma County Tourism, introduced a new revision to our business improvement area at yesterday's Board of Supervisors meeting. And this revision provides an opportunity for all entities within Sonoma County to participate, who do participate in the BIA or in that geographic area to participate. What this does with the BIA is currently there is a threshold of $350,000 annual revenue, and this eliminates that annual revenue. And I provide public comment simply to let folks know that we are continuing down the road of this initiative. Lots more communication is going to come your way, either via snail mail or in a couple of town halls that we are going to host next week. But for those of you who might be vacation rental owners or are in that industry, we would welcome your input and welcome all the questions and opportunities that this initiative will provide to you as business owners. So this is just a kind of a quick introduction to that. So maybe we will lessen some potential surprises when those communications start coming down the pike. But know that we will do our best to communicate with you and answer any questions and continue down with this process. So more to come, and I hope to be on an agendized item here very shortly, but just wanted to let everybody know about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia.
And Chair Eagles, I'm seeing no further hands.
Okay. Do any of my fellow council members have comments or other questions? I suppose just for Claudia, because she was our only commenter.
Well, you can't really discuss that, and hopefully
no.
we will put this on a future agenda, hopefully in August, so that you can discuss it. This was the direction of the board.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Gorin. And I think that's a wonderful segue. Hello, Supervisor Gorin. I think it looks like you're up next on our agenda. So I will pass it over to you. Hannah, let me know if I've forgotten anything, but I think we're good with public comment. And so I'm going to move on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Eagles. It's delightful to address you as chair now. Not much change in the leadership here, and I thank Arthur and you for continuing the strong leadership of the North Sonoma Valley MAC. And I'm not sure that Claudia is still on, but I didn't even know that she was a neighbor in Oakmont, so I'll connect with her. And let's talk about that briefly, in that they did present a proposal to the board on Tuesday, that would be yesterday, just about 28 hours ago, and asking for additional funding revenue. We didn't really get into potential benefits for Sonoma County for the additional revenue, but because they're proposing to eliminate the threshold of 350,000, it means that smaller businesses will now be paying an increased TOT, as well as larger businesses paying increased TOT. So I think it's worthy of a conversation and a future agenda, and I'm not going to generate conversation here. And the reason why I joined Supervisor Hopkins in asking for outreach is because I know that businesses in the river area, businesses in Sonoma Valley may fall into the pool of small business owners who might be asked to pay. It's not the businesses that pay, it's obviously our visitors that pay the increased TOT taxes, but it may impact the visitor decisions on whether or not they want to relocate or they want to vacation here in Sonoma County. This would be in the unincorporated areas, but they have a letter of commitment from the cities. And of course, the cities really don't generate a lot of TOT. It's mostly those entities in the unincorporated areas. So hopefully you will have an opportunity to discuss that next month. But I would encourage you to outreach to those small businesses in Glen Ellen and Kenwood, asking them what they think, because the outreach notices are going out, I think maybe today, asking them their opinions. And so we'll have a couple of opportunities to hear from them at the board level, but they are now moving forward with some aggressive outreach. So enough said about that. We spent quite a bit of time yesterday working with our activists throughout the county on the living wage ordinance. We had approved a weaker version of the living wage ordinance some years ago, and we had not been as thoughtful and as detailed as we probably need to be. So we're now discussing how to strengthen the ordinance. Specifically, should it apply to the airport? And I think we might get board support for that. But there's some question of what businesses at the airport it might apply to, and some businesses it may not apply to. We're not sure that it should apply to the operations of the Sonoma County Fair, but that's to be determined. There was some conversation regarding the number of sick days. Most of our employees, if not all of our employees, already have 12 days of sick pay. And I was questioning why we just didn't say, we affirm this is important. And no, it's part of negotiations. So the county is being very firm about that, as well as some other issues, part-time employment versus full-time employment. And I did talk about the fact that here I am advertising for a part-time board aide. If anybody of you knows anyone in Sonoma County that wants to apply, please let us know. We haven't had anyone in Sonoma Valley apply. We've had a couple elsewhere, and they're good folks, but we haven't interviewed them yet. I'm hopeful that we can get someone, hopefully someone bilingual to help us out with some of the outreach and services we provide in Sonoma Valley. So we gave direction, and this will be coming back to the board, I think early January, for a determination and board support. We'll have the same board then, so it may not change. We did approve the cannabis application for Eric Pearson Spark on the cultivation site in Trinity Road. That was in the afternoon. And there may have been something else happening, and it escapes me at the moment. So I look forward to hearing from you, answering your questions, and also to let you know that I'm going to take a short break because we're starving and I haven't eaten dinner yet. So you are between me and my dinner. Oh, one more thing I did want to talk about, I am obviously very supportive of many of you who have written to the Planning Commission and the board regarding SDC, and also the action that you've taken as a MAC and a CAC. And the schedule, as was proposed, was that this item would be zooming through the Planning Commission and then coming to the board early November. And I said, no, the Planning Commission needs more time. I've been working with Greg Carr on approaches that he might take, and we were able to telescope the board action out until to the special meeting, December 16th. And so it gives more time for the Planning Commission, especially the newer members of the Planning Commission, some time to absorb and understand. They had a good tour of SDC, asked a lot of very good questions, but now it comes down to reviewing the plan and having discussions about what the plan actually is. I believe the final EIR has been released maybe yesterday, maybe today. So if you're an ER nerd and want to go diving down into that thick volume, then it's available online for you to go through. I've not yet gone through it to figure out, obviously, it's just been released, to figure out if it's substantially different than the draft. I suspect it is not, but I will need to get more briefing from staff and perhaps Greg on that. So that concludes my report. And oh, one more thing. I keep saying one more thing. I did interview a charming woman, Patricia Lindo. She may be on now, to fill one of the vacancies of the North Sonoma Valley MAC. She's a resident of Glen Ellen. So I asked her to participate, or at least tune into the MAC tonight, be on your best behavior so you don't chase her away. And but she's excited about joining all of you. So hopefully she's on there and will comment and introduce herself.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Gorin. Do you have a moment? Can you stay for a
Just a
question?
quick-
I can. I'm
Okay.
not fading from hunger yet.
Okay, quite yet.
I just wanted to follow up on Susan's comment. I'm excited that Patricia has applied and she spoke in front of the MAC. I didn't know she had another last name, but that's Patricia Galindo is how I know her. But we'll use her
Well,
preferred name.
maybe you're right. It's Galindo. Thank you for the correction.
So we have all met her, and I'm excited that she's interested. I think she'll be a great addition.
Great.
So maybe next month, if we haven't chased her away, she'll be joining you.
All right,
Great
you're out there.
news. Yeah.
Patty. Nice to have you here.
Yeah,
Great.
I'd like to add to that too. We're thrilled that she's here, and I see that she's on our panelist. So she's listening. Welcome.
Great. Council members, do you have any other comments or questions for the supervisor before we turn it to the public? I have one question. I think you said the Supervisor Gordon, but just to confirm, the December 16th meeting, will that be a meeting? That's a board action item, right? To vote on the EIR and the plan?
It is.
Okay,
It
thank
is,
you.
and it's a special board meeting. We had tentatively scheduled it for closed session, and we were trying to find room on the agenda. And the first two meetings in December were packed full, as usually happens in December. So we gave up the special meeting, the closed session for this meeting. I'm not sure that we will get the full board there, but the good news is we won't have any other items on the agenda except for a check-in and a good discussion with maybe many of you.
Thank you. Anyone else before I turn it to public comment? If you want to make a comment, as you know, hands raised, please, and Hannah will call on you.
All right, just giving folks a few moments to raise their hand. But I'm seeing no hands.
All right. I'm going to take a dinner break and I'll be back to join you momentarily. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Yeah. Okay. Next up on the agenda is the Transportation Ad Hoc Roads Working Group. So I think I will turn it over to that working group. We have Vice Chair Dawson and Council Member Oldroyd. It's
sorry.
just the two of you, right? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hannah, have I forgot something?
Our next item is
Oh.
Creative Sonoma, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kristen, if you're out there, my apologies. I skipped the whole agenda.
It happens, Kate.
So I want to introduce to everybody Kristen Madsen, Director of Creative Sonoma, who's going to talk to us and give a presentation about Creative Sonoma's emerging plans for a public art plan for the county. Oh, there she is. Hi, Kristen. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. I will not take that personally, but I will just say thank you for your great endorsement of our proposal, that it went by so fast. I feel like I missed it. So
Please don't take it personally. Thank you.
I will also not take it personally that Supervisor Gorin is taking a little break. She has heard this proposal, this spiel already once, and will hear it again. So which is great. But thank you all for inviting me to come to this meeting. I'm really delighted to get a chance to talk with some folks about what we're talking about related to public art in the county. I'm encouraged to see some really remarkable artwork in the backgrounds of several of you on this call. So I'm hopeful that that art is something that is part of many of your daily lives as it is mine. I run Creative Sonoma. It's the county's department that is here to support and advance the creative and cultural community of Sonoma County. We've been around for about 7.5 years. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our background, but just know that we do that generally speaking through grant making, through professional development and training of our artists and arts management community to help them do what they do better. We have a robust arts education program trying to make sure that our students TK through 12 have access to high quality arts education. And then we run a variety of special initiatives. And I'm also happy to say that one of our founding board members is proud Glen Ellen resident Elisa Stansel, who just barely termed off the board, but Glen Ellen was well represented for her 6 years on our board and will continue to be. So, and if anyone wants to know more about Creative Sonoma, obviously you can find me through Hannah after the call. When I mentioned that we have other special initiatives that we're working on, we have one that is moving up the agenda for us over the past year, and that is to create a public art program, which I'll talk about in Sonoma County. And I'm working on that in conjunction with Supervisor Gorin and Supervisor Rabbit right now. When I say public art, that means different things to different people, I know. So for the purposes of our conversation, we want to talk about public art really being bringing art into our public realm, theoretically for the public good. Usually, public art is thought of in association with public construction, so a development or a construction project, but not always. Sometimes it is manifest with a physical product, a sculpture or a mural or a painting of some sort, but also not always. But that's the sort of the rough definition of what we're talking about. Your most recent example I can think of, obviously, is the beautiful murals in Glen Ellen at the Garden Court Cafe building. That is the backdrop to this opening. Oh, I haven't shared my screen. It is the backdrop to our opening slide. So let me share the screen so you'll see what I'm talking about. There we go. I hope you all are familiar with that fantastic piece of work. So some of our municipalities in Sonoma County have public art programs. Santa Rosa is kind of probably the premier example of that. And again, Supervisor Gorin had a lot of work to do with getting that one going, but we don't have one for the county overall, which means that in particular, any public art that happens in the unincorporated areas is a little bit sporadic, maybe at best. We have to be opportunistic about how we do that, which is why we think we should have a full-fledged program for Sonoma County. And it's why it brings me here today. We've been talking about this with a consultant we hired 9 months ago on this project and interviewing 60 people all over the county to think about what a program could look like. Reviewed tons of county plans from the various departments, county budgets to think about what it could be, how it would be funded, all those kind of great things. And we're just now feeling like we have the skeleton starting to come together for what it might be. And so we want to start test driving it with consumers, people who don't think about public art every day like I do. So people like you, that's why I'm here with you all today. Would love to hear from you at the end of my presentation, given how much time there is, or afterwards. What do you like about what we're saying here? What makes you nervous? what can you do to help us make this whole concept a little bit better as we go forward? And how do you see North Sonoma Valley in this plan? So I'm going to go through a variety of slides, but I'll try to go through them relatively quickly to help you see what we're thinking about and talking about. When we began the process, we decided we needed to make this obviously Sonoma-centric. So we needed to know, what do people value about Sonoma? How do we make this special to our unique place? And came up with 6 values. And by the way, the first one was, let's see if this is going to go. There we go. Our land. So whatever we do has to recognize this natural beauty in the environment where we are. The people and the places and the narratives that have shaped our county, our history. Our innovations of making and creation that occur everywhere we look. The traditions, the struggles, and the accomplishments of all the people in the county. Our collective experiences, including our traumas, of course, but also our commitment to a new future together. And our hunger for connection. And you will not be surprised to know that the folks that we talked to in Sonoma Valley, this was high on their list. They were the first folks, I think, that raised it with us. So those are sort of the values that will underpin anything that we put together in terms of this program. So now we're going about thinking, okay, what is it going to be and how is it going to work? And I will share with you, we're not naive. We know there are a lot of challenges in Sonoma County, particularly those that will affect the financing for something like this and the implementation and much, much more. Those realities I'll talk about a little more at the end, but they are definitely pushing us to try to create a program and a plan that is flexible and that is innovative so that we can help address those realities. All right, so putting it together, our first thought is, who can help us with this and who do we want to partner with on it? Obviously, our sister departments within the county. Some of those folks have the same objectives as we do or parallel objectives, and we feel like if we incorporated art into those objectives, we might be able to advance both our causes at the same time. There are lots of countywide agencies like SMART and tourism, who you just heard from, et cetera. Again, working in the public good, what are the ways that we can say, can art help you advance what it is you're trying to do? And there are many, many nonprofits, as we know. We have a plethora of them in Sonoma County. So what is their role with this and how do we help what they want to do? All of this redounding to the benefit of the artists and the cultural organizations and cultural workers that will be the backbone of all of this. So having in-depth conversations with people from all of those different groups is what's led us to this plan. And the core of the plan I'll show you examples of the kinds of things that we think we can do together with these various partners. And I'm going to show you a lot of these so that it will prompt ideas in your minds as you're thinking about this. Oh, how could that work here? Can we see how this could function? Are there different ideas? Because as we all know, good ideas come from any source. So we are wide open to what you might want to say. All right, so here's a couple of ideas we're talking about. And I'll give you some detail as to how it would work as we go through that. Capital projects. So if the county is building the new government center, for example, 1% of that budget, this is a typical model, 1% of that budget could, and I would say should, be set aside for art that's associated with that project. That's a really traditional model for how percent for art programs work. And so we think that should be involved here. Now, there's lots of room to say, okay, what level budget building should apply to that? And are there carve-outs? That's all to be determined. But the idea of having a percent for art attached to any major new construction in the county is great. Along those lines, we got a lot of bridges in Sonoma County, and there are 15 that are currently in the pipeline for construction. Adding an artist into that conversation and thinking about how art could be incorporated into an already existing construction budget could give us some bridges that set us apart and make us a little bit proud of not just the function, but also the form of our bridges. Regional parks, what a great opportunity. These guys are so active in annually planning and thinking about how they're going to update and upgrade what it is that they're doing. And we love the kind of examples like you see in this photograph of ways that art and the environment show a juxtaposition and how they come together and how they intersect. So thinking about what's going to happen in our parks and how can we add art into that mix. We've got water towers in Sonoma County. And as a matter of fact, all of the water towers in Sonoma County are slated to be retrofitted and repainted at some point over the coming year or two. That's a lot of water towers. That's a pretty interesting canvas. Now, We also know many of our water towers are in natural environments. So this particular image is to just let you know what we're talking about here, but that may be a little garish. But imagine in the hands of an artist being involved to say, what are you going to do with those water towers when you repaint? And instead of just painting them green, as most of them are, what if we had an artist who really is a color specialist, who really understood how a palette, even in simple variation, might make a statement? I'm sure you were catching the spirit of what I'm sharing with you. But here is a slide that will give you an idea of something that we think is a little innovative and maybe most unique that we might be able to do with this kind of a program. We have, as you know, a new Office of Equity, and they actually worked on this literal project with the Department of Health when they were working on a messaging campaign to folks in the county that were fearful of being vaccinated. And so potentially an artist could work with one of our county departments that maybe doesn't do a lot of building, but that has a need to engage the community in their campaigns and in their projects to try to help them come on board with an idea that might be challenging. An artist could look at that and say, yep, let me be in residence with you, department, figure out what your needs are, and then help you manifest that. And whether it is a PR campaign like this, or maybe it's a community quilting project, or maybe it's a kiosk for storytelling, an artist's eye on achieving that objective could really help advance what the county's trying to accomplish. We know that there in the Springs and Sonoma Valley area, there are new bus shelters on the books being ordered. Well, the standard bus shelters have a lot of glass backdrops. Those make really great places for murals. And along those lines, same with bike racks. This might be a place that we partner with a local community partner, because we may want to do, as I mentioned, we want to work with nonprofits also. So maybe, for example, the library needs bike racks. How about we do something a little special there that is whimsical and fun, and again, lifts everybody's spirit and vision about what art can be in our lives. And the last kind of category that we may work on with our projects is through, we're calling them curated projects. And that would be where Creative Sonoma might see a specific need or opportunity and put together projects that make sense in all kinds of areas around the county. And what I'm showing you is something you should recognize, which is the Sonoma Town Square. And that is a piece of art that went up there during the COVID shutdowns, which Creative Sonoma funded as we were trying to help our businesses reopen by using art. And so working with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Sonoma Valley Museum of Art, we funded new art to go in the town square. And I know you had for a time parklets. I know that they're no longer around, or soon to be no longer around in the valley in Sonoma. But to bring art in and help people know that it was safe to come out and be in public. And a similar project that I'll just mention briefly, because you should keep an eye out for this. This is to come. This is another Creative Sonoma funded project, which is there'll be 2 new murals, temporary murals, going in at the Sonoma Community Center. And there will, both of those have community engagement elements, so you could be involved in helping determine what those murals are going to be. So you catch the spirit of what we're talking about and what we're hoping will happen. So now I'm going to just spend the last remaining minutes of this presentation talking a little bit about what we're thinking regarding funding and how it will work, and then open it up to any comments and questions that you have. So as I mentioned, we're not naive. We know there are headwinds in the county, and we're all feeling them. You know, what's going to happen with the economy? Are we in a recession? How is the county going to replenish the coffers of its emergency resources that we have tapped so many times over these past years? So that's an issue. We know there's not a lot of free money out there. We also know that specific to our planning, this county is really big. So serving this whole county with public art is a giant challenge. As the county doesn't do a lot of building along the lines of the one we talked about, the new government center. You know, there's not a ton that happens in an unincorporated county. So that one source of funding for a program like this probably has to be combined with some other sources. So what we're leaning toward is doing exactly that. We'd love to see the county, rewind. Let me just say one more thing. All of these recommendations will end up going to Supervisor Gorin and Supervisor Rabbit to get them to massage it and say, that's a crazy idea, or yeah, that could work. And then they will help us take this to the full Board of Supervisors, we hope in January sometime. And they can say, you know, we love it, we don't, we think it can go, but could you make these changes? And one other piece of information is we spent some time talking to all the budget staff at the county to make sure they know what we're talking about as well, and have them give us their counsel about these very things, these headwinds and these potential opportunities. So now, fast forward back to, we're talking about potentially having a % for art attached to municipal projects that are of a significant size. But we're also talking about asking for an annual allocation out of the general fund. Probably not a giant one, probably in the neighborhood of $300,000 a year, something give or take a little bit. And then we want to help the supervisors and the staff think about how they calculate what that dollar figure is from year to year to help us have some consistency from year to year. So maybe that, as an example, would be 1% of a rolling average over the last 5 years as what has been spent on capital projects. So since we know we don't have giant ones, maybe we look at the overall average with all the little ones added up together, and a percentage of that might be the way we would fund our project. So we're giving the supervisors about 4 or 5 options to look at. And the final option on that list is it's possible that we would look to private development to also be assessed a fee for new development that they're doing in the unincorporated areas. That's again, a very common and traditional practice with municipalities that have these kinds of programs all over the country, actually. So some combination of a variety of funds to help us move this forward. And then the last slide I want to just mention, as we deal with the governance, how it works, a couple of things we know for sure. There has to be really clear, clearly stated objectives, have to have transparency about how this process is going to work and who's going to be making decisions and how they will make those decisions. What is the process for application? Everybody needs to know that. We'll follow the rules of, tell them what you're going to do it, and then tell them what you did. So everybody is clear. This is how it all worked. That process for decision-making is transparent and the community can watch it happening. We know that it will need significant community engagement. So we're building that into our processes because we aren't going to be making any of these decisions by ourselves. This is public art. It's for the public. It's in the public's backyards. So the public has a voice and should have a voice in all of this. And then the last thing I'll add that's not on this slide is we know that everybody that's involved in this process has to be humble about this work and about the results. And that means today what I'm doing here with you, and as we get through to the plan being adopted, but also as projects get done case by case, we have to be willing to listen and to learn and to adapt throughout the whole process, because we know that this is going to be an evolution, not static. It felt like a really quick and dirty getting through this all. So I will stop sharing my screen and kick it back to you all in case you have any comments or questions for us in this moment. And before I do that, say also, I'm delighted to meet with any of you at any time to talk about this further. So.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. That was really interesting. And we do have some questions. Council Member Oldroyd, I'll start with you.
I love the examples you gave of public art, especially the ones that go into nature. I'm an architect of public projects. And so my experience with these types of 1% funds is that the funding goes to public art within the facility, on the facility. So I'm just wondering why it seems like you're taking away from that resource, which would benefit the facilities to go to other places.
That's a really good question. I didn't mean to imply taking away. So let me try to walk through this. First of all, in private, if there was a private assessment, more than likely that would definitely be up to the developer to say, yes, I want it with my building, or I will give you the in lieu fee. You're probably familiar with this. But in public construction, we're talking about both. So we're talking about, on the one hand, public construction at a certain dollar threshold. So any building like the government center, the SDC, if there's a satellite office built for the county in the town of Sonoma, which I heard mentioned last week on another call, those buildings would likely have, if there was a percentage of that budget of that project set aside, that money would stay resident likely to that project. That's essentially what we're talking about. But because that would be a really small amount of money and also only a handful of projects over time, we're also talking about a request to the general fund of this county of Sonoma, which is the $300 threshold, which would be the place where it would be flexible to try to do projects in places that, like, you wouldn't have a government center necessarily in Sonoma Valley kind of conversation to try to get more public art. So it's really additive, a combination of these sources, not trying to pit one against another. am I answering your question okay? Okay, great.
Councilmember Nardo Morgan.
Oh, hi. Yeah, thank you so much. This is really wonderful. I think art is just a really important part of what should happen in a community. And I know that a lot of us were connected with Maria de Los Angeles as consultants for the project that she did in Glen Ellen. And that was really fun and really added so much to our community. I noticed that when you were talking about the section, who can help, you mentioned nonprofits, you mentioned county agencies. But one thing that you didn't mention, and maybe you know about it, were the local universities, Sonoma State, the JC, even ArtQuest, which is the local high school devoted to art. And I
Right.
think if you explore this connection, it could not only provide, you know, of course, the wonderful kind of creativity that you're looking for with art, but also a really important financial collaboration. Because I think if you work with students and with the university, you would find maybe collateral funding through grants and through government funding. So I urge you to explore that avenue.
Excellent comment. Thank you very much. I am taking notes.
And Councilmember Dawson.
Hi, Kristen, thanks. That's really exciting. This whole program is very exciting. And I'm a writer and a poet, and I worked for about 30 years with California Poets in the Schools.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic.
So I was curious if there's a literary aspect that you've been considering.
Yeah, I'll, you know, we're not trying to devise any specific program right now, but when I talk about the flexibility of it, we would love to, for example, have a poet involved in a public art project. And I know I don't want to take too much time, but I'll give you a thumbnail on the project that I mentioned that we're funding at the community center. That's under an umbrella called Art Surround. We're doing it all over the county. In Geyserville, we have a poet, and she's also owns the letterpress over in Sebastopol. She's doing a project with grade school kids there who are doing a poetry curriculum, but they are all talking about butterflies, after which they are all going to make these beautiful tiny little metal butterflies on sticks that will all be then put into the Geyserville Sculpture Park, if you know where that is, just off the 101. So it's, you know, teaching them through poetry, ultimately manifesting in this beautiful, you know, thousands of butterflies that are going to be in the park. So yes, we would love to incorporate.
That sounds
all
great.
disciplines.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to have a conversation with you sometime about
Great.
a couple ideas.
I'll follow up with Hannah and get your contact info.
Okay, great.
Right. Councilmember Dickey.
Thanks for your presentation. Excuse me. Just a couple of questions. The emphasis is obviously on visual art installations, and I'm wondering why no performing art? I mean, or multimedia presentations. There was that one structure you showed us that looked like a woolly mammoth made of wood. And it struck me that inside that you could have some sort of, I don't know, sound effect, you know? It could be music, it could be birds, it could be any number of things. And yet all of the examples that you provided were strictly of the art installation type. And I'm wondering if is that just the way that public art is typically viewed, and there is no accommodation for the other art forms that we all sort of live with?
It's a really good question. And the answer is, you know, in part, yes, that is what people generally think about. And no, it is not what we are trying to be exclusive to. So your examples are perfect. I love installations, sound installations, or video or projection, light projection installation, or performing arts. My background is music, so I, you know, have a soft spot for the performing arts. So one, it's a good note to Kristen. Please think about how you add something in this realm into your presentation so people don't wonder if we are excluding it. But to answer to you, yeah, we would love to make sure that we're including multimedia and all genres in this process in the best way that we possibly can.
I mean, as an example, I'm gonna assume, for the sake of discussion, that you've been to Paris. And in the subways
Okay.
of Paris, they routinely have performing musicians that are paid by the state to, you know, I wouldn't say entertain so much as it is to maybe soothe the traveling public.
Yeah.
And it struck me that you could do the same thing at a smart station. You could do the same thing if somebody comes into any kind of public building, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, the sound of a cello echoing through an antechamber that would otherwise be somewhat like a mausoleum struck me as being, you know, outside of the norm, but also entirely artistic in its own way. And, you know, I mean, it's disappointing that we hear these things about public art, and it's so the spectrum of it is so narrow. When, as I said earlier, we all live with art every day, whether it's TV and it's, you know, basic entertainment, or music while you're traveling in your car, or singing a note to yourself, or, you know, the sound of a bird is to some degree pretty artistic as well. And so we're emphasizing our visual acuity at the expense of all our other senses, it strikes me.
Matthew, I think you're articulating it very well. I appreciate it. I'm going to steal and borrow some of your language because I think it's really appropriate. And we'll also point out, we do have at Creative Sonoma a grants program where we do fund some other kinds of projects that are all genres as well. But I really take your point and support what you're saying about, you know, this is public art. There are such interesting and amazing things that artists can do in our public realm. So let's try to figure out how to foster that. Thank you.
Kristen, I have one kind of question, comment. You've talked about, you know, public input or community input. And so for community members here on the call, how does the community input sort of intersect with where you are with, it sounds like you're seeking more of a regular funding or annual budget, annual planning, but you're also doing work right now. Can you speak to at what junctures the community will be able to provide input, or would be appropriate to provide input because maybe you're doing something in that community, you know? Does that make sense as a question?
Let me clarify one thing. Do you mean in this creating the plan, or do you mean once the plan is adopted and we're doing public art projects?
Well, I guess both. So
Okay.
well, I guess let me just back up a minute. So you're doing work now in the community, but you're also creating a bigger plan right now. And presumably once the plan is created, you'll seek input, right? Is that correct in terms of your timeline or your progression here?
That is correct.
Okay.
Within a month or so, we hope to have the plan on our website. And so people can look at it there and get feedback. We'll let you know, and you can give it there, or I can, if you're interested, come to another meeting and talk through more details of it. You can see there. So that's for that part. Yes.
Okay.
And then for ongoing work that we're doing, some of our work is artists specific, where artists have the ideas about how they want to engage the community in a particular project they're doing. We encourage it. We've actually done a 2.5-day training with about 30 artists to help them gain the skills to do community engagement with their art. And that's what's happening, for example, at the Sonoma Community Center. So those muralists will be doing community engagement there. And I don't have the specifics on that, but can try to get them to you when they're engaging in that process. For a public art plan for actual project, if this plan is adopted and we're doing that, we're developing the process now for the tiers of how an artist might, and Creative Sonoma staff might work to engage the community. So you know what's happening, you know what's coming, you know what might occur, and where do you give feedback, and how do you get involved at a deeper level if that's of your interest.
Great. That really answered the question very well. Thank you. Better than I asked it. Supervisor Gorin, you have a comment.
Thank you, Kristen. And every time I sit through one of your presentations, I come up with about 12 more questions. I'm wondering if you have the photo of Phoenix so that you could share with the community.
I can get it because it was, I'm sure you saw it was in the Press Democrat today.
We dedicated yesterday an incredibly beautiful tapestry of fiber arts. The Council for Fiber Arts, composed of 24 artisans, crafted this beautiful weaving, the triptych, and it was exhibited at the county fair this summer, although I tried to find it and I couldn't find it at the fair. But Linda States, one of our fire survivors, there it is, fire survivors on Cavedale Road, was sitting at the table and she looked at this magnificent work of art and said this needs to be hung in the county somewhere, and couldn't get traction on it until Bill Jackson sent the email to me, and I said, absolutely, we will find a space for this. And Kristen Madsen and our CAO Sharon Bratton were instrumental in finding the space in the lobby of the administration building. And it is pretty tall. So you see how colorful it is. In that hallway, it doesn't appear to be that colorful because it's up really tall, really up to the ceiling for an obvious reason. You don't want to have little dirty fingers touching it. So these are some of the amazing artisans who came up with the idea and moved forward, starting right after the fire and culminating in this piece of work. So it's not only the grants that are generated through Creative Sonoma, but artisans in our community move forward in doing something wonderful and then find a place for them. And I was so excited to be just a small part of that. And there I am. When the weather was a little cooler, it was not 90 degrees, and I was wearing a heavy jacket. And so it was beautiful. And if you have a chance, come down to the lobby of the administration building at the county, because there it sits and is hung. And thank you, Kristen. One of the reasons why I am so excited about Kristen speaking with all of you is she knows that every time she announces award winners for the grants, I bug her and I say, so who are these artists? Are any of them from Sonoma Valley, and why not more? Because I know we are rich in artists and artistry. And so I hope that, Kristen, can we maybe include the MAC members on your notices going out so that we could pass it by the amazing artists that exist in our community, and so we can get more of those artists funded, because we know so many artists lost their homes and studios in the fire, and we want to try to support them as richly as we can. But I also want to say, Matthew and Kate, your questions are right on. I served on the Art in Public Places when I served on the council in the city of Santa Rosa. We did have 1% for art. And we did fund performing arts and things on the street corner. And Creative Sonoma does as well. They offer pop-up grants. And we had a series of panels of Sonoma Valley artists, and they hung their panels of smallish but magnificent pieces of art on the area soon to be, whatever soon is, in the community plaza in Boise Hot Springs. And then they were gone. And I went, wait a minute, why do we want part of pop-up art? I want to have it there. I don't want to just have it there for a week or two. So Kristen and I have fun with each other. And but you know, you're right. It's about supporting artists in all different ways. And she would love to have your input on what else they can do on a rather limited budget and leveraging amazing grants that they receive from other organizations. How can we do more? And I still have in the back of my mind an art trail through Sonoma Valley. Kristen and I talked about that immediately after the fire. I would love to have public art similar to the Healdsburg Art Trail and along the multi-use path. And then I would say, will we ever get the multi-use path completed? But also, I think Sonoma Developmental Center should be rife with artists and art studios and places of performances in a small scale, not a big scale. So I look forward to a rich opportunity to talk with Kristen and invite Connie Schlalin in to talk about what she's doing to really connect the valley through art. So I'm sorry, you got me started. You just found my passion.
Yay.
Welcome, Council Member Handren. And any other council members have any comments or questions for Kristen? Kristen, I hope you can stay for a moment while we open it to public comment as
Oh,
well.
Sure.
Oh, and Angela, Councilmember Narden-Morgan.
Susan brought up an interesting thing about SDC, so I have a quick question about that. I actually discovered some art there on the walls tucked behind. I mean, I hike through there all the time, and I generally don't hike in this one area, but I went back in this area and there are all this beautiful art there. And I'm wondering, how do we sort of chronicle that? How do we make sure that either it's not destroyed or it's, what do we do about that? I took a picture of it, so I have it.
And good, I'm glad you did. Forward the photographs to
Okay.
Greg Montgomery or anybody working on the museum.
Well,
For
I mean, I'm in that group too.
You're in that group too. You should know who to connect with. And so document it and alert them that this is worth preserving, moving, keeping there. Kristen, do you have any other ideas?
No, I'm surprised and delighted to know that it's there. And but when you get a little further down the road, let me know. And if there is any need to, for example, have a conservator or someone take a look at it, we'd be happy to try to help find resources for that. We don't do that or know it, but happy to help in whatever way we can.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone, assuming council members have no more comments, does anyone from the public have a comment or wish to speak on this issue? Please raise your hand if you do, and Hannah will call on you.
And we do have a hand raised. So I'm going to share the timer slide. All right. And this is for Thomas. Thomas, you should be able to unmute. And Thomas, I think we can hear you faintly. Maybe if you have oh, there you are.
Can you hear? Okay. I must have been doing something. Thank you. Great. In regard to council, I believe member Dickey's comment was about music, so I don't have to make that comment. I was going to, but I was thinking of music and even movies, or sometimes you can display movies and have people come out, kids or even families and things, and then culturally that's a little bit different. It's more of you can have an interactive conversation about the same movie critique, or what did you think about, what did the movie make you think about, as opposed to just watching a movie passively. You can do the same with an art installation. And I think an art installation is really great in the fact that it's usually permanent. And so there's many times when people could come back and reobserve it. And so there's a whole gamut of those things, from the permanent to the musical, a performance, quite transitory, and then to a movie itself, which could have commentary and things like that, or a critique, which can be a learning experience. That's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Anyone else, Hannah? Yeah, we could hear you. Yes.
And giving folks a few more seconds. And no further hands.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Kristen, and Creative Sonoma, for that presentation and for keeping us in the loop on how this is progressing. So we look forward to hearing more.
Same here. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And I'll look forward to connecting with you all and start receiving emails. You'll be getting emails from us. So if your email box is full from Creative Sonoma, you have Supervisor Gorin to thank for that. Thanks, all.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, and now we'll move on to item 6, the Transportation Ad Hoc Roads Working Group, and introduce the group, Vice Chair Dawson and Council Member Oldroyd. And
can I just say something? I've been super busy with work, so this is Arthur's doing. It's
okay.
Participation in my part. Thank you, Arthur.
So I'm yeah, thanks, Susan. So yeah, you can call me the North Valley traffic engineer, or whatever you want to call it. And I should give a disclaimer here. I mean, we were just tasked with finding 3 to 5 roads in our area that we thought were most in need of attention. And these are roads that, well, good news is, once I went out, I can tell you for a fact that all of our roads are better than the roads in Uganda in 1988. There we have, compared to that, we have incredible roads. So, so we don't need to do anything for 20 years. No, just kidding. So I went out and I basically just drove around. We had a map, and it was a little, you know, for next year, Susan, it'd be great if Public Works could actually give us like a list of the names of all the roads that they would like us to look at, because it took some interpretation to figure out what roads were being done this year, what roads were done last year. You know, it had to do some filtering, and that took time. But anyway, I think I successfully figured out what I was supposed to be looking at, and it was mostly came down to downtown Glen Ellen, downtown Kenwood, and then a couple places like Hoff and Fry Roads up in Kenwood, and then also the Rancho Madrone, south of SDC neighborhood. So those are sort of three main areas. And I had no rubric to start with, so I just thought I'll start driving around and assign numbers as I feel like it, and come up with something as I go. And so basically, you know, I started looking at like, well, if it's got a pothole, you know, I mean, I didn't only spent maybe 2 hours total. So, but you could take this further, but you know, if there were potholes, that was kind of a low ranking. If there were potholes that went all the way down to subsurface, that was like, you know, the worst. If there were no potholes, but there were cracks, that was better than potholes. And then if it was, well, I didn't really look at any brand new roads, but that would have been like the top level. So with that in mind, with my very spontaneous rating system, I don't, Hannah, do you want to put up the list that I sent, or I could just, it's not a long list, so I could easily just say them out loud too.
I'm happy to share it if you'd like.
All right, well, I'll just say them out loud, and then if people want to see it. So for Kenwood, Hoff Road was one of the ones, and then another one was Randolph Road, which, you know, on the surface may not look all that bad, but considering how much use it probably gets from the school being there, and also considering that, you know, we're talking about paving projects that are 2 or 3 years out. So I figured, you know, 2 or 3 years, Randolph likely will want some attention. And then in Glen Ellen, well, my first list was Chauvet Road, Hill Road, that's off of Gibson, which is up the hill from the what is that called now? The cafe on the corner of Warm Springs and Arnold. And then at the very top of that hill road, there's something called Garrick Road. It kind of tees off up there. So those were the 3 top of my list in Glen Ellen. Although the more I thought about it, well, one thing is I didn't have like a distance, like the Hill Road and the Gibson Road. I mean, sorry, Hill Road and Garrick Road. That's not very much pavement. That's probably certainly less than a half a mile, might be like a quarter mile, third of a mile. So it's not that much. But anyway, I thought, and those roads don't get that much traffic, so I might substitute Gibson, which gets a lot more traffic, has a lot more houses on it, for one or both of those roads. And then, yeah, there's other places in Kenwood. We can show the list of people.
I think it would be a good idea to show the list if you
Sure.
don't mind,
Yeah.
Arthur, just to
Yeah,
give
yeah.
everyone some context.
And I don't personally drive a lot of these roads very often, so I don't have a big horse in the race. This is just kind of from what I saw from driving around for a couple hours.
Arthur, can I ask a clarifying question? Because we do on the agenda have a vote on this evening.
Yeah.
Is it the intention to provide a top pick, second tier, third tier to the county? Is that the intention, or just to
No,
pick the top?
No, I just arranged these. This is just how I arrange things. So you know, the 5 at the top were the ones I thought were the top picks, possibly substituting Gibson. We were supposed to pick 3 to 5.
3 to 5. Thank you. You
top
said
picks.
that. Yeah.
So, but the other ones I just put in, I figured I had the information. Why not just include it? I know the county might be interested, but even if the county's not, you know, maybe local people who are thinking about these things might say, well, actually, I think Hill Road off Arnold should be second tier, or should be top tier, or, you know, whatever. So this is my very unschooled attempt at being a road engineer.
Hannah, quick request, would you mind scrolling down just a little bit so we lose the top paragraph, but we get third tier in there? Thank you. Oh, I think we could almost just do it. Yeah.
So like, for example, just another little bit, like Fry at the bottom is not in very good shape, but it's, you know, it's a very untraveled road. From what I can see, there's only maybe 3 houses on it. So it doesn't seem like it would be a big priority, except for the people who live there. So if they're in the audience, they may speak up, but anyway, so these are all the things I was kind of taking into account. Happy to discuss, happy to, you know, we could just, you know, if the looks like Susan's got a question.
I do.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
I wondered, so what were your criteria?
So the worst rankings were ones that had, you know, visible potholes. So those are, and partly I was just rating them by, you know, driving the road and how bumpy did it feel. So kind of subjective, but you know, I mean, there are definitely differences. So, so that's how I came up with this list. So like I was saying, yeah, potholes, you know, I think the top picks all had some potholes in them or lots of cracks. Randolph, maybe not too bad, but like I said, it's starting to show some wear that won't be redone for at least a couple of years, and it's a busy street.
I can tell you it gets patched about
yeah.
every 3 months
Yeah.
frequently.
And if I saw lots of patches, that was sort of counted. Well, I don't know how exactly. Anyway, I was aware that some roads were patched, and that kind of indicated that they weren't in the best shape. Yeah, Matt.
So it's paving only. It doesn't take into account maybe the reason that the road's in such poor shape is because of the drainage on either side of the road, for instance. I mean, you know, I live on Williams and, you know, my property backs up to Chauvet, so I'm pretty familiar with that area. I mean, Chauvet is basically a gravel road at this point. And, you know, a lot of it has to do with the amount of construction that's taken place over the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
But also the washout from the rains that come through, because there's just not the amount of drainage that there should be. And so even if they go ahead and they pave these things, I mean, if you don't take care of the washout across, all that gravel and debris just further compromises the roadway structure. So just clarifying for myself, this was only about paving, it sounds like. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, I wasn't evaluating the drainage. And I should say, even though Williams is down in the 3rd tier, there is an area near London Ranch Road that's not in very good shape, but it was pretty short. That's why I didn't elevate Williams up to a higher.
And
higher
Chauvet's clearly the worst of the, you know, of the at least those two for sure.
Okay, well, good. So we have some agreement. I can. Okay, let's Angela.
Yeah, hi, Arthur. I just was curious, did you take into consideration the fact of how heavily trafficked these roads were? Like if they got a lot of traffic, if there was a lot of, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning, like with Randolph Road.
Mm-hmm.
It's in better shape than some of the other roads that were ranked lower, but knowing that it's heavily trafficked from the school. And it had a lot of patches, as I think Susan mentioned. So that pushed that one up the list in my mind, that it needs attention before too long.
Okay. Well, can
Yeah, Susan.
Member Oldroyd, yeah.
Randolph, first of all, I live on it, so it's I'm prejudiced, but it is a walking path for school. Every day going back and forth are trails of moms and kids and families and dogs and much pedestrian traffic there. So I am wondering if you'll consider adding pedestrian traffic to your criteria list. And that only happens a couple of streets in Kenwood. typically. One is Randolph is the extreme example, but also Warm Springs as it goes through Kenwood gets a lot of cross traffic, and then traffic that goes to the community center, the depot.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just what you're saying, we can certainly add that in as another factor. I mean, it sounds like Randolph is high on the list, and Chavez,
I agree.
Glen Ellen has been confirmed as being high on the list. Yeah, Matt, or let's take Vicky. You hadn't heard from Vicky yet.
Yeah, hi. I can understand why they're not included, but how do the bridges in Glen Ellen come into play in this? I mean, I understand they're a little bit distinct because they're just short little stretches, and maybe there's different plans for them, but are they able to be considered at all?
And this is Susan Gorin. I've been asking 3 different directors of TPW to resurface the decks of the bridge. And Janice Thompson is checking on the schedule. But yes, it's uppermost in my mind, especially as I participated and walked on the Cobley Road on the Glen Ellen Village Fair. So yeah, it's a different process. And what they have to do is often they have to scrape the road base off before they can repave it, because the bridges will only accept a certain weight limit. So it's complicated, but yes, it's on my radar. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Arnold was not among the roads that I was evaluating, because it was I forget exactly why, but it didn't show up as something I should be looking at.
Well, it's because it's been recently repaved.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. I want to say, I don't know if we've mentioned it here at the meeting, but maybe a month or so ago, I noticed that they put in some permanent crosswalk, or much more permanent crosswalk lines in downtown Glen Ellen. So that was good. Yeah, Matt.
I was always under the impression that bridges, no matter the size, were a Caltrans authority rather than local road management authority. Is that correct?
It's not my understanding. I know that this is on the schedule for repaving for TPW, but they do have to, as I mentioned before, they do have to be careful about the weight limit of the bridges. Now, maybe there are certain bridges that are certainly under Caltrans authority, such as the bridges along Highway 12, especially those 2 being replaced.
Was that true then for like the Boys Boulevard Bridge? Was that a Caltrans project, or?
No, that was Transportation and Public Works. However, TPW managed the project, but Caltrans often funds the bridge replacement work.
Okay. But so resurfacing, would that also be Caltrans finance?
I think in this case, those 2 bridges are TPW at the county.
Yeah, boy. Then we don't have to wait 300 years. We could wait maybe 30 months.
Maybe.
Council
Yeah,
member
Angela?
Nara Morgan, you want to speak?
Yeah, Arthur, I was wondering about Warm Springs. I know you and I both live on Warm Springs. Is it not in the group because it's recently been? I know it's incredibly trafficked, lots and lots and lots of traffic both ways, constantly, and no shoulder. But maybe it's because I think it recently, part of it was paved.
I think it was. Yeah, I think that's why it wasn't on the list.
Okay.
The one thing I should say, I don't know if this showed up on my list, but I did not get up to on Sonoma Mountain Road or Enterprise to evaluate those.
Yeah, those
possibly could be 2 others that if somebody in the audience, I mean, I'm assuming Supervisor Gorin that it's not like this is being decided tomorrow. This is.
No, it's not. And I just wanted to say thank you, Arthur and Susan, for thinking about this. This is something that the D1 team has done every year in anticipation of the road paving cycle and scheduling. And what often happens is we have recommendations from Transportation Public Works based upon the condition of the road and what the roads crew are seeing on the roads. And then we evaluate it and pull funding off of some roads because they're only used by, 10 people, and then add roads in some of the more populated areas. And we send them back to Janice. So we will send your recommendations to Janice, and she will apportion the funding. And often at this point, we say maybe 40 to 50% of the funding will be allocated for neighborhood roads. And then we do have some important roads that desperately need some repaving around the county. At some point, St. Helena Road will desperately need repaving. But there are Sonoma Mountain Road, we're looking at, we've done part of it, and we will probably break it off into 2 or 3 other sections and then get to Enterprise. Enterprise doesn't carry as much traffic as Sonoma Mountain Road, except for my husband who loves his favorite short bicycle route. But I don't care what kind of condition it is for him. And so the Springs is doing the same thing, making recommendations on a number of roads. I just wanted to comment on Rancho Madrone. Interestingly, it was one of the first neighborhood that reached out to me when I was first elected to really complain about the condition of the road. And I vividly remember that a neighbor sent me a photograph of a child, like maybe 3 years old, playing with the asphalt like sand. And I said, boy, that was profoundly affecting. So we did get out there and do some preliminary work, but those roads probably should be on the list either this 2-year cycle or next 2-year cycle. And I would also comment on Carmel. We know that Carmel is the end of a potential bicycle route from SDC going through Glen Ellen. And at some point, Carmel will need to be repaved. I went out to Alice Horowitz's house and I said, oh, it's beginning to need repaving. But I appreciate your conversations about, I've noted Los Gulicos because I ride on my bike there. And Randolph, I absolutely agree with you. Susan, it's one of the priorities that we place on road paving is those roads leading to schools and parks. And so we'll evaluate those roads. And excuse me, the people off of Kenilworth are jumping up and down because their road has been repaved using the PG&E funding. And Lawndale, Schultz, Bristol. I also want to say some of the narrow roads will be challenging for the neighbors to navigate during the construction and repaving process. Ironically, we are having, my husband is the president of the sub-association, so we have a paving contract for a short private road, and they just said, okay, we're paving Friday and Saturday, and you're not going to be able to use your cars. That road is going to be closed, so you'll have to keep your cars down at the bottom of a pretty steep hill. And so some of the neighbors who are really physically challenged, we don't know what we're going to be doing in that instance, but please know that they try to do the best job they can on a narrow road, but they need space on each side of the road, which is what happened on the Trinity Oaks neighborhood. They were complaining because the machines excavated and cleared vegetation a couple of feet on each side of the road. So we might prioritize, and then the property owners will just have a hissy fit because of the potential damage or impacts from the repaving. So it's not easy, but we'll do the best we can. This is a good first stab at looking at prioritizing for the first, second, and third, which means it's probably the first, second, and third 2-year paving cycle. And I think we'll send it out for Janice to to really absorb and try to take the road widths and the road lengths. And one more comment about drainage. Yes, they do indeed look at drainage. And often they improve the drainage before they repave the roads. Because you're right, repaving the roads without looking at the drainage is nonsensical. So that's my comments, and I'm waiting to hear from anybody else if there are different priorities. But I thank you, Arthur, very much for your work here.
You're welcome. Yeah, Matt?
Follow-up question for Supervisor Gorin on your comment about drainage. So do those dollars come out of a different pot, or
Nope.
I mean, will they go ahead and do the drainage and then come back later and do the paving, or how does that work exactly?
Well, often they will work on the drainage, do the evaluation on the drainage, and then they'll come back and pave, but it's all out of the same funding bucket.
So if it's, you know, more costly, like let's take Chauvet Road as an example, and they have to sort of do more than just repave it. So they might push it off until they can come up with deeper pockets to do the entirety of the project.
Or what they will do is say, let's take Chauvet, including its drainage, and wait on another road or two. If that's the priority, Chauvet, then we should focus the energy on that and the financing on that. I would, whoever, Arthur, if you have prepared this report, could you put a little asterisk on those roads that may need to have the drainage reviewed, for example, on Chauvet? If there are other roads on this list, I have a little frog in my throat now. If there are other roads that need to have drainage examined, then put a little asterisk there.
Okay, I wasn't really looking at that, so I'm happy to put an asterisk by Chauvet if anybody else has an idea. I would say on, you know, on Chauvet, I would be concerned that, because I think there's that new house that's going on kind of directly above you that with a really long driveway that goes up a steep hill, and that
so
could be
you wonder, okay, are they going to prioritize completing all that construction and stuff before they would go ahead and redo the roadway? I mean, to some degree, it makes some sense, you know.
The schedule for road repaving takes so long that you might ask about the pace of construction of that house. Usually construction will be completed. What they will do is they will come back and have a conversation with our team. We're recommending X, Y, and Z roads. And then they'll go off and do the design specifications to prepare for the bid. And then they have to go out for the bidding process and evaluate the bid, accept the bids, and schedule the road paving projects over 2 years. And it might be at the latter part of 2023 and 2024 when they know the weather is going to be dry. And so it's amazing how long it takes.
Rome.
Really.
Kate?
Yeah, thanks, Arthur. So just a couple of things. We do need to take public comment on this, but I wanted to get the council members thinking and maybe ask Supervisor Gordon and Arthur, would it be, we don't have to approve this tonight, but we could approve a short list, or we could actually approve a longer list. It sounded like this longer tiered list might be useful to Supervisor Gorin and colleagues, county colleagues. We don't have to decide this right now. As I mentioned, we have to take public comment, but think about what we're going to do here tonight, what makes sense to folks.
I would recommend that you take a stab at approving this if you have public comment. And not all of the roads on this list will be scheduled for repaving, absolutely. So there will be time over the next couple of years for you to evaluate the roads as you see happening in Glen Ellen and Kenwood. But we need to get on with comparing the roads and compiling the roads in the Springs area and the North Sonoma Valley MAC, adding the other roads in the district to it, so that Janice has a nice long time. Remember, she does this for 5 districts, so she needs some time to actually get down to the weeds and work on this and then bring it back to the team.
Great. So are you saying, to be clear, are you saying the tiering is important or better to focus on 3 or 4 priorities, or is the tiering okay?
Well, I think the tiering is important because you
thanks.
can then say, okay, your top picks, if you have a discussion about that, great. Those will be the roads that will probably be included in the next 2-year paving program. But the 2nd tier and 3rd tier may be scheduled after that.
Right.
Right. Any other comments from council members for now and before we take public comment?
And Kate, I would add on the bottom of that, we'll reminder again, the decking for the 2 Glen Ellen bridges.
Yeah.
Could when we get to voting on this, maybe Hannah can just add that into the bottom of the list and also add the asterisk that about drainage. And if we get any more, we can add, then we don't have to go back and forth. We can just approve it.
Right.
And
Perfect.
I can send it in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I can pull up the Word document version of this.
Okay,
great,
and add
great.
that.
Ready to go to public comment, folks?
Yeah.
Sounds like, oh, Hannah, you have 2 things to do at once. I'm sorry.
She does that well usually.
I know she does.
All right, and we do have a couple hands raised, so I will share the timer. All right, and first up is Kathy. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, my name's Kathy Pons and I live in Kenwood. I just wanted to say thank you to Susan Gorin and everybody else that made it possible to get Lawndale, Schultz, Bristol, Mervyn, and Kenilworth all paved. And it's just been heavenly to drive on them, and almost feels like you're floating. But anyway, I just thought that was a wonderful achievement, and I thank you, Susan Gorin, and everybody else that had a handle in that. So I appreciate that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
And thanks, Kathy, for that comment. We're getting a lot of great comments from people living on the roads or using the roads. And my response is, you need to thank the whole board for allocating PG&E settlement funding to pave a lot of roads, especially in the 1st district. But sadly, it took really devastating fires to get to that point, to get the funding for the roads. Cavedale, who thought we would ever be able to pave Cavedale? And here we are. And be careful if you're going on Cavedale. It's going to be, pay attention to the traffic signals, Cavedale and Trinity, because it's going to be closed. You have to go from one side and then the other side, and it's going to be great to get it paved, but it'll take 2 to 3 weeks for those roads to be paved.
All right, and next up is Deborah. Should be able to unmute.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Nitasaka. I live on Mound, which is a private road that meets up with Gibson. I'm very familiar with Gibson. It really is in dire need of repaving. I'm also familiar with that little stretch of hill and then Garrick. What I want to say here is piggybacking on the need to consider drainage. We have homeowners on Mound who've decided to pave various sections and without doing any sort of drainage work, and they were not required by the county when they were doing new construction to do that. And so we now have the potential for a very, very serious flooding situation. There are at least 2, possibly 3 homes that will flood at some point because of this. And because Mound intersects with Gibson at Gibson's lowest point, there really is no point in paving Gibson because that's going to wash out as well. So if you're going to do any sort of serious drainage work, you really need to look at how the roads that meet those intended to be paved are going to affect the quality of that work overall. The drainage situation here is really tragic. It's tragic. I've met with Supervisor Gorin. I've met with folks at PRMD, including Michael Carey. Everyone has just kind of blown me off as, it's a personal problem, but it isn't going to be a personal problem when 2 or 3 homeowners lose their homes. All I have to say.
Thanks, Debbie. And we'll make a note of your remarks about Gibson. If in fact that's one of our roads, we will need to evaluate drainage there. And you're right, you and I have had multiple conversations regarding drainage.
Next up is Thomas. Should be able to unmute. Thomas, I'm not seeing you unmuting. Maybe it was hand raised by mistake. One more try. Thomas, if you're ready to make your comment, you should be able to unmute. And still not seeing you unmuting, so you're welcome to email me your comments as well, and I can get those to the full council. My email address is on the agenda. And with that, Chair Eagles, I am seeing no further hands.
Hey, oh, there.
I just had a question. We were told to pick 3 to 5 roads. I'm kind of getting the sense that maybe moving Gibson up, so we have 6 roads in the mix. Would there be any problem with that?
That's fine.
Okay. Anybody disagree with doing that?
So that would be in the first tier, you're saying? I think, okay, in the first tier.
We just moved, so we moved that one up, and then, so we have 6 in the first tier.
Do we need to make a note on Gibson of potential access, close access drainage issues, or?
And Hannah will include that and note that.
Okay.
Thank you, Hannah.
And our other asterisk was for
Chavez.
Chavez on the upper tier.
Oh, there we are. That work for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Hannah, make sure you include a note about the decking of the 2 bridges.
Sure.
That's going to be in my bucket list. I am not retiring until that happens.
What happens if it doesn't get repaved?
I guess I just have to stay your supervisor forever. I may come out there with a bucket of asphalt from Home Depot and do it myself.
We've got the Birkeland Bridge. Maybe we can call it the Gorin Bridge.
That's right. I would love that. But I've warned Janice and Johannes, the 2 J's, you'd better get the bike lanes done on Arnold. I'm so tired of haranguing you about that. So we will be working on community outreach for the bike lanes on Arnold, probably starting in January. And at that point, we'll come to the MAC to make sure that you're part of the community outreach for that.
Great. What else? Anyone have any other? It's the second page on that has best condition, but if no one objects to having a sort of a tiered list, I certainly don't have a problem with it. But if anyone else does, I mean, they're on the second page that we're not showing on the screen now, there are best condition listings. I guess my question is, are we okay leaving that in this draft, if we're working toward a motion to approve?
I would advocate leaving the whole list the way it is, and then, TPW can use it however they choose.
I agree with that.
Agreed.
I would like to call it a draft still.
And through the chair, should I add draft?
Oh, I'm sorry.
here,
So if we do add draft and we do move to approve, let's just say, I guess that can be included in a motion, what that draft means. And it sounds like this is an ongoing process. It's not a huge rush. So I assume if we do submit a draft, we could update it. Councilmember Oldroyd, do you want to elaborate on what you're thinking there with the draft?
Well, I just would like to see some of the conditions for myself before making a final decision.
We still have some length of time in the process. I think it's important for all of the MAC members to go off and explore the roads, to just check them out yourselves. But we'll turn in this list to Janice, and then we'll have some time to review it. I suspect that even some of these roads are going to fall off into the second tier, depending on how much it costs to repay. Some of the road, there's total full depth reclamation, which is the most expensive, and then expenses for drainage work, of course, chip sealing and regular sealing. So there are a variety of road pavement conditions which Transportation and Public Works decides on based upon the condition of the road.
Okay, so it sounds like a draft would be useful at this stage, but there's certainly time and provision and likelihood that this will be a draft, and there'll be, more information and prioritization to come. But it sounds like it would be helpful, and I think we do have to, if we're going to submit the draft to Janice, I'm assuming we have to approve it here formally. Is that correct?
I think that would be very helpful, and
Okay.
you might put on there draft because you
Yep.
still want to evaluate the conditions of the road, but for right now, this is your recommendations moving forward.
Great. Do we feel ready? Would anyone like to propose a motion?
I move to approve the list.
Second.
I guess we can have discussion now. Do we need to modify to approve the draft list, or is that a given because it says draft? Probably a given since it says draft, but.
And you might clarify, even though you approve this, you might clarify the reason for the word draft, because there still may be fluidity and discussion moving forward. But for right now, these are the recommendations of the MAC.
Maybe just is there a date on at the top? I can't remember.
Good idea.
Okay, move to approve the list, the draft list. Just trying to link these two thoughts, the draft list with provision that this is too complicated. The draft is because there may be fluidity in further discussion or evaluation.
And Hannah is a great wordsmither, so I think she understands what you're trying to achieve, and she'll take a hand at crafting the language.
We trust her. At least I
Right,
do.
if that works, that works for me. Did we second? Did anyone second?
I
We did
did.
have a second. Okay. Are you ready to vote? Yeah, Hannah, you're okay with that wordsmithing? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? I think that was unanimous. So I think we're good. We're good. Approved. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, ad hoc.
So much. This is one of the most important functions of the MAC, to get the local input on really important actions at the county level.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you again, ad hoc. And moving along, are there other reports or announcements from either council members or ad hocs?
I just wanted to thank anyone who was involved in the Glen Ellen Village Fair. It was a marvelous event. It was full of joy. Everyone was so happy to get together without the threat of wildfire. And even with Pebbly Road, it was great to see everybody come out. And I did not win that quilt. I tried to stuff the ballot box and didn't win the quilt again.
Councilmember Dickey?
I don't know if this should falls under considerations for future agenda or reports and announcements, but in our last CAC meeting, we discussed having a combined meeting between the CAC, our MAC and the Boys MAC regarding, for lack of a better term, the Graywood Ranch development. And I know Ariel was going to talk to Hannah. I'm not certain where those conversations have led. But that would mean probably that we would have just one meeting next week. Next month, sorry, next month.
I do have some, I guess not surprising to me, considering how sensitive they are about community criticism of the project, that the representatives for the Kenwood Resort, that's what the name is now, not exactly interested in appearing before the CAC. It is a voluntary appearance. They want to hold their own open house and community event. And right now, they don't have a date or time to do that. And when we find out when that date is, then we will let you all know, and you can appear as individuals, and we'll have to figure out how we make sure that it's not, well, this is not something that you, well, let me ask you, is this something that the MAC would want to make a comment on in the future? If so, then it's going to be somewhat complicated because we don't want to have a serial meeting. If it's just informational and you want to just hear what they have to say, then we don't have to worry about it, but you'll have to be on your best behavior.
My understanding was that the presentation to all three bodies was largely informational. There wasn't to be a resolution or anything of that sort. They were just going to explain their process, sort of refamiliarize everybody really with what's going on up there because it's been so long. That was my most recent information.
The winery is already an entitled part of the project. So the CAC and either of the MACs would not have the ability to say, no, we don't want the winery there. That's already, with the number of events, it's already part of the approval process, even before I was a supervisor. So it really is an opportunity just to hear from them, potentially about their plans for vegetation and how they view the design of the winery moving forward. It will go to design review, I think, because that's really where the purview is.
So Supervisor Gorin, you said that they were not interested in presenting to the CAC. So is that scheduled, or I'm not clear on that part?
They are holding their own public meeting.
Right.
And they will let us know when that is.
Okay, so they're not on your CAC agenda for this next meeting, Matt, is that correct?
No, I guess not. No,
Okay,
it was,
okay.
I hadn't heard any further updates, so I wasn't certain as to what the status was. I just wanted to make that observation to everybody that we were thinking about, I didn't want the MAC to have 2 meetings next month. I was trying to save you that burden. But it doesn't sound like there's going to be a presentation that would be, for all 3 of us. So, the point is moot.
The point is moot. But stay tuned. We'll let you know when the public meeting happens. And I'm not sure whether they're going to rent out the Kenwood Depot or the Kenwood Elementary School to have a public meeting. And I know who's involved, but no one has outreach to me.
As long as we're on that subject, I have a question. When you have a project that has taken so long to develop, I mean, I know from a building code standpoint, for structural compliancy and that sort of thing, you have to follow new building code. So you have to update your plans for all the structural components, energy, those things. But what about design review? Obviously we've had changes in design review since that project was initially approved. Do they follow the new design review guidelines? And why wouldn't follow-up question then, why wouldn't the new winery guidelines follow suit? I mean, I know they're advisory, but nevertheless, it would seem like there would be some threshold beyond which you just don't want to push these things, correct?
This is an entitled project from long ago, over 10 years ago, and they have made some progress on the project, roads, for example, and obviously they've been rocking and reeling because of the fires, the devastating fires up there. So as per the process at Permit Sonoma, if they continue to make progress on the project, the conditions under which they were approved follow through. Now, you're asking about the building code, and I don't know the answer to that specifically. I would think as they turn in their building plans, then they would have to follow the new building codes rather than the building codes from 12 years ago. And I think the same is true with a winery. They would have to follow the building codes because it's not entitling a project. It is turning in the construction drawings for a project. And Susan Oldroyd may have more information about that because I bet you she's been involved in things like that.
True, it's when you first submit for a permit, and it may have been many, many years ago, and it's under that code of that year.
So you submit plans and it's under the code for the building code from 12 years ago. Okay, there you go.
And I haven't experienced having to deal with updated design review. So I am assuming the design review issues are similar, that they have an argument if their design doesn't meet current height guidelines or whatever, that they could say it was permitted under the existing or under the previous design reviews.
You all may remember when Vatma sued the developer at the time for very limited discussion, and one of it was a review of lighting. It was not design review, it was really just lighting. So eventually it did go through the design review discussing exactly that, lighting. And of course, now the conditions have changed because so much vegetation has been lost up there. And so those buildings are going to be very prominent and lit up even more than what was approved, but the county is not going to go backwards on that as much as the community would like them to. And so I think, but I don't think, I'm not sure about design review for the winery. And I think that that is really what is narrowly going to be considered by the project applicant. As frustrating as it is for all of us, that's what it is.
Okay. Have they talked about any good neighborliness?
Well, I think that is the point of the community meeting, and I would encourage folks who have an interest in it to go there and ask those kind of questions. What are they proposing for revegetation that would disguise the buildings anymore? And I have heard that they actually do have plans for extensive revegetation. I don't know what they are, haven't seen the plans, I'd love to go up there on the site because I haven't been up on the site since the fires, but so far I have not.
Thank you. Any other follow-up, Matt, or any other comments from council members on ad hocs or other announcements?
I just have one comment, that I think it's a horrible irony that they could go ahead and build up there under previous building code and fire code, and then have just recently gone through the fires that, of course, are now exposing the project visually, but also it would be their own self-interest to update the fire code and requirements for that project, you would think, which might lead them to have to redesign the buildings for, I don't know, better fireproof exterior materials or something. But there must be exceptions to the building code given the fire danger that it's facing, where they go, well, okay, that was 12 years ago, but we're going to insist that you do something a little different just to make sure that people don't die in these fires.
Well, Matt, I agree with you. I can't imagine why anybody would move forward in building a high-class resort with the fires that have come through so fast and furiously. But I also can't imagine them moving forward without really looking at all actions they possibly can to use fire resistant materials and design, fire tanks up there, fire pressure tanks, or water pressure tanks. When you build that
Gray
kind of
water use, all of it, yeah.
when you build that kind of high-end complex, the last thing you want is to have people die on a fire. That would not be good PR. So,
No, no.
and they may self-insure, but they're going to be looking for fire insurance. And good luck. We were able to have only one company quote on our fire rebuild, and State Farm. I'm not happy with State Farm, but there it is. And so they're going to have to do what it takes in order to insure it and ensure that their clients and their customers are safe, especially during evacuation. And trust me, I do not know why they carved that road up there that is such a scar. And someone hiked up the Gunsight Rock and said, well, there's quite a bit of activity in the crevice there where that road leads. And I haven't been in shape yet to hike up to Gunsight Rock. So that rock behind me, I'm working up to it. So I'll check it out. But if you happen to get up there, let me know what's up there.
Drone shots.
Excellent. I love it.
All right, I'm going to open it to public comment. I don't think any ad hocs have any more comments, guys. Is that all right?
I'm sure we're way beyond the Brown Act.
Do we have any public comment at the moment on this item? Item 7. This was
And giving folks a few moments. And Chair Eagles, I'm seeing no hands.
okay. I'm going to move on to our item 8, which is consideration of items for future agenda. We talked about one earlier in the meeting. Anyone have any other thoughts tonight?
And I would just add that we put Claudia Vecchio on there so that she can more completely describe what it is she's doing, and especially the benefits. I'm curious as to what benefits would accrue to a community like Glen Ellen and the Valley.
Okay, yeah, noted. Yep.
But also note that there are 2 cities not in the business improvement area, Sonoma and Healdsburg, and so, but they're essentially advertising and supporting tourism for everybody else.
Anyone else have thoughts tonight on other agenda items? Okay. I don't have any immediately either, so. Okay, I guess we need to take public comment on this as well, don't we? Hannah, any public comment out there? Any public like to comment on this item? Agenda items for future?
All right, and I'm seeing no hands.
Okay, okay. Well, that leaves us one more thing to do. Do I have a motion?
I motion that we adjourn.
Seconded?
All in favor? Thanks, guys. And before we go, I want to thank you for helping me through my first meeting as chair. And thanks to Supervisor Gorin and to Hannah and to Barbara and to my fellow council members and to the members of public who have attended tonight. So
And
thanks.
I want to thank you all for your hard work on behalf of the community. It is so important that I support, our team supports the work that you do and being the voice of the community. So thank you, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you,
well,
Susan.
Thank
And
you.
thanks, Kate. Nice job.
Thanks, Kate.
Well done, Kate.
Thanks all. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.